Hello and welcome back to my show and my channel. I'm your boy Victor, and today I am super excited. I don't know if you guys can tell, I am super nervous because today I am sitting next to greatness. She is super funny, super smart, really beautiful. She's super talented. I have with me the honor and privilege of, having a conversation with Favor Gam, who is Cameroonian born. She's raised in PG County. She's currently a junior at the University of Maryland College Parkway, pursuing a degree in neuroscience on pre-medicine track. Beyond academics, she's passionate about advocacy, particularly in education and health equity, which she then now uses her writing as a means to uplift the voice of a black girl child. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, oh my God, I can't thank you enough, but I present to you Favor Gam, the author of To the Beautiful You. Why are you not clapping? Clap, 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 clap. Yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Well, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much to Victor for having me as his first guest.
Great.
So my name is Favor Gam. I am the author of To the Beautiful You, the book we have right here. So basically a little bit more into the book. The book is titled To the Beautiful You for Colored College Girls.
Right.
It's basically meant to encapsulate the lived experiences of young black girls who are pursuing their passions and their purposes, and also just like navigating different spaces. And the book basically has two separate themes. The first one is much of like the narrative portion, which covers a lot of aspects about my life from like my upbringing.
Right.
And then the second portion is a lot of like thematic essays, which are basically essays that touch on topics that I feel are relevant to young black girls today. So I'm really, really honored to be here just to speak a lot more into like my book and then my other projects and advocacy work that I do.
Right. And I'm once again, like I started, I told you I did try to order the book. It didn't come on time, but I, show how much dedication. I did do some research, on your Instagram and all that. And I found pages of the book that, we're going to be discussing today. But before, we get into To the Beautiful You, I would like to know a little bit more about Favor Gam, right? So, in the description that I read out, I talked about how you were born in Cameroon and then you immigrated to the United States, which in the car you did tell me that, you lived in Dubai for a little bit before moving here to the United States. So how was that like, moving from Cameroon, Africa to Dubai and, then to the United States? What did that do for you as a little, not necessarily little, but as like, as a child, as a kid? What did that do to your esteem, you as a person and trying to fit into the culture that, you met here in the United States?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So much of what that question touches on is a lot that I talk about in the first chapter about my book.
Oh, wow.
It basically talks about me immigrating from my home country, Cameroon, and then coming to Dubai. I felt like I learned a lot of adaptability skills in terms of like knowing how to move in different terrains and environments. Of course, like culture shift was definitely one of like the most impactful things that I experienced during that time.
Right.
Having to learn how to navigate being in a different space that isn't like centered amongst like people that look like me or people that speak like me. So just learning how to kind of like navigate those spaces was definitely something new to me.
Right.
And I definitely had to like look in internally and really pull into my sense of self and understand that though I am in different spaces, I still have to be authentically myself to, be a happy individual, to kind of like sustain myself. And in the first chapter, actually, I talk a lot about my experience in Dubai in terms of like facing things like bullying and racial discrimination. Yeah. Specifically, there was like an instance where I had like a lot of interactions with this one particular girl who basically like would spew out a lot of like kind of really mean comments about my hair.
Oh, wow.
And so that really like it shook me a lot at that time as a kid, coming from an environment where everyone who had like a hair texture similar to mine, and I could feel comfortable in that environment. And then now I'm in this different environment where people are telling me the way that you look isn't necessarily like something that's appreciated or accepted. And so it really like did a little bit of like a hit on my self-esteem at that time. And so it really took like a lot of like really like self-tuning and like self-reflection to really understand that, you know, I need to appreciate myself for the way I am, or I'm never going to be happy and satisfied.
Right.
And so I feel like it also took a lot for me to like kind of work through how I felt towards that person.
Right.
And understanding that like the behavior she was projecting towards me wasn't necessarily that she's a bad person, just more of like she's consuming negative things from the world and the environment around her.
Right.
And that like, you know, I have to give her grace and understanding that like she's a product of her environment.
Right.
Yeah. So that was kind of like much of what the first chapter touches on.
Oh wow. And you know, I totally, you know, I could relate. I thank God nobody has necessarily said any, you know, anything really weird or super crazy to me, but I could relate to, you know, trying to fit into a society where people don't necessarily look like you or, you know, do things the way you do things. And I think that one of the things that I even struggled with as well, I came here when I was a teenager, but you know, you were a kid. So I'm like, how was that really like for you, like with self-esteem? Was there ever a time where, you know, you would say you don't want to go to school because, you know, people would pick on you? And particularly now in the United States, like having moved from, let me even ask, did living in Dubai make it easier for you in, like, you know, in moving to the United States, maybe because you had already experienced a little bit of this discrimination in Dubai? Did that kind of soften the blow right here in the United States, or it was still something that, you know, you still fought with, you know, when people would say mean things to you as a kid, like particularly how it was for you as a kid?
Yeah, I definitely say it did soften the blow because just like shifting from an environment where no one looks like you to an environment where a decent amount of people look like you definitely will make you feel more comfortable.
Right.
I feel like when I lived in Dubai, my kind of like way of like dealing with those situations was kind of like making sure that like I always hid myself. And so even though I wasn't like the only black girl in the school, there was like, I think there was 2 other girls.
Oh, wow.
And they were both sisters, and they were way more like outspoken than I was. And so much of like the mean comments and the hate was more targeted towards them than in comparison to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they were more outspoken.
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like the minute I stepped into that space, I realized that like if I acted too much or acted a certain type of way, people would like kind of like look at it a type of way and start treating me bad.
Right.
And so I feel like that's why much of the hate was targeted towards them, because they were more outspoken, more towards like validating themselves whenever they spoke. And so people kind of like saw that as a bad thing and always like wanted to target them. Like we'd be on the school bus and they'd say something and then they just the girls wouldn't have it. Like they'd literally go back and forth and be bickering, and then I'm just sitting in the back seat just like quietly just there. And so just like seeing how they navigated that space was like really, really interesting.
Right.
And sometimes I really felt bad myself for not like speaking up for them. But at the same time too, it's like I have to understand like I also had my own challenges.
Right.
So that was that. And then just like coming to the United States, it was definitely also like a culture shock in terms of like how different it was from Cameroon.
Right.
But I feel like I definitely did deal with it better. Just in terms of like the fact that I already know how to like move in these type of spaces. Like if anyone says anything to me, I know like to just be a little bit more quieter or like not to be too loud as like most people would like attribute to a black girl. So things like that.
Right. And you know, it's interesting that, you know, you talk about how, you know, I'm trying not to say you had to, you know, like shrink yourself, you know, and now you are an author, and I'm thinking to myself, or you know, my question would be, was writing a form of like an outlet for you, where you would just pen down whatever you're feeling concerning some of these things that were happening to you, or you know, was writing an outlet, or was it like a safe space for you, like where you would run to, like to hide? Like, you know, you spoke about where, you know, you had to, you know, you were hiding and stuff like that. How, you know, do we correlate what you experienced as a kid to your love for writing?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because the first chapter of my book, I actually open up talking about writing and how it is an outlet for me.
Right.
Especially like during those troubling times of like learning how to adapt to being in a new space.
Right.
I remember I got my first journal around the time when I moved to Dubai.
Okay.
And I told this one particular story in my book about how like I was writing about how I had a crush on this boy that was in my class. But then my mom saw it, and then she literally like took the book and then threw it away.
Oh wow.
So it's really, really funny.
Yeah.
And then like it wouldn't be until like years later when I really like started like delving back into writing as like my form of like expression and as an outlet. And then of course I made sure like this time it's like a digital type of like writing, so my mom wouldn't come and find it. But yeah, it's definitely been my form of outlet, just because I felt like if I can't express verbally how I feel to the world because I'm scared that people are going to retaliate, my like
safe space.
Yeah, my safe space is going to be just like, you know, writing things down, because I know I have that space, and I know I have power in that space, and no one else has access to it. So.
Oh wow. You've touched on some very interesting things that we would eventually get to. But you know, speaking of your mom and speaking of your family, I'm just like, how did they take it? You know, were they always supportive of the fact that, you know, we have a daughter or sister or sibling, or, you know, who's a writer who writes how she feels? You know, how are they receptive or not of, you know, your writing abilities?
Yeah, it's actually really strange because I actually didn't tell my parents about the fact that I was writing a book until like months into writing it. Because I did get grant funding for the book, and when I found out that they were giving me money to write the book, I didn't tell them immediately, just because I wasn't sure of like what the reaction would be. Wasn't sure if they would believe in me, wasn't sure how much support I would get. And I feel like that's similar sentiments like in an African household when you're trying to try something new. You don't necessarily know the reaction of the community. So that's kind of like the lens I was looking at it through. And it wasn't until like a couple months when I actually felt like I had something of substance that I was like, okay, let me propose this idea to my parents. So I ended up telling my dad about it first, and you know, he was very much on board. He was like, wow, like that's incredible, that's amazing. And then he ended up telling my mom, but I still feel like in the back of their minds they weren't really like, they didn't fully process what I meant by I was writing a book. So when I started like releasing out like the social media graphics, that's when they started realizing like, she's actually doing something. Because I mean, I feel like on their behalf it's like that's something new to them, like coming from like humble beginnings. We're not used to like authors, we're not used to like doctors, like going to school. I'm the first person in my family to like, you know, want to actually pursue a medical degree. So it's just things like that. So it's like I kind of did expect them to take it the way they did, especially if like you're moving towards like being a change maker, you're giving opportunities that your parents traditionally weren't given. Of course they're not going to see it instantaneously and be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. They have to like process it first.
And how did that even, you know, make you as a person feel, knowing that, you know, because I'm gonna share from my personal experience too, you know, of I wasn't necessarily now I'm way better, way better, but I wasn't the brightest student, like the best academically, but I just knew that I loved to act and I loved to do things like this. And so but I knew that I came from a very, very academic family, and so even the thought of wanting to pursue an acting career and stuff like that, I know that because my mom is a really quiet, patient lady, so I was able to share these things with her. So she particularly was always on the journey. My dad not necessarily, because I remember there were some auditions I wanted to go for that, you know, I would have to send my mom, you know, to go talk to him about it, or tell maybe an actor or somebody to call him and tell him that, you know, because and not to shame him or anything, but you know, that was what he knew best, you know, which was academics and stuff like that. But I'm just like, how did that make you feel, knowing that writing was something you wanted to do? You have been given the opportunity to write this book, but you know, you weren't too sure of how they were gonna receive it. Does that make you feel somehow that sometimes we have to second guess or like think twice before we carry our family along with certain things that we do or we want to pursue?
Yeah, I feel like writing my book or embarking on the journey of writing my book really taught me the importance of like community and like having people that are there for you to kind of like uplift you in a sense. Because my parents, they actually surprisingly took it a lot better than I thought they would, especially towards the end. Like my mom, she'd post like a lot of like the graphics that I had on her like WhatsApp. She'd forward it to a lot of her friends. Like a lot of her friends even ended up buying the book, which I was really, really grateful for her for. And so just like seeing that reaction was like, it was really, really nice to see that that she was supporting me in a sense. And kind of the same with my dad too, really, really supporting me. But I'd say in the beginning was probably where I faced the most difficulty, because that's when I realized that I had to like really, really tune in to my self-confidence and make sure my self-esteem was really, really there. Just because I felt kind of like isolated and alone at that time. Just like, does anyone believe me? Is anyone there? And of course, like I had my friends that were really, really supportive of me. But you know, family is always number one for sure.
Yeah,
so yeah.
And yeah, like to not, you know, dispute, like it's always just the beginning, because eventually, even when I started doing interviews and stuff, my dad, you know, also became one of my biggest cheerleaders. Like, you know, he would send it out to his friends, send it out to family members. So family members did, you know, my mom too, you know, they would support, they would share these things with, you know, people that they knew also and stuff like that. But it's just always like, you know, the beginning of not, you know, being able to, you know, necessarily carry them along from the beginning, because we're never really sure sometimes how they would, you know, receive this. And so, you know, now I want us to go a little deeper into your book. There were certain things that you talked about in this book, like, you know, about tears and, you know, being a child who, you know, would cry a lot, you know, being an emotional person. Being an emotional person, I think, in society is not really taken well, because a lot of people feel like, oh, if you're a very emotional person, you know, people would ride on you, people would trample on you and stuff like that. So first of all, let's start with your family before friends, right? How did they handle you as an emotional person? Like, you know, being, you know, immigrant parents, and, you know, how was that like for you, like growing as a child who was very in tune with her emotions? Were your parents also in tune with their emotions too? Like, you know, how did they, you know, deal with you or handle you? I don't know if that's a good way to describe that.
Yeah, I get the question. I'd say kind of like, I have to first like acknowledge that like we all come from like separately different environments. And I'd say that like the environment they grew up in was entirely different from the environment that I grew up in. I know for my mom and my dad's family upbringing, they didn't have the most like emotionally sensitive and like emotionally supportive environments. And I feel like that really kind of like influenced a lot of like the behaviors and like the kind of like tactics that they enforced when it came to like parenting and raising up their children. I'd say my mom, she's not like necessarily the most in tune with her emotions. And like, of course, like you have to default understand like her environment wasn't the best. And so I feel like that's something that I really had to like understand growing up as a child, that I didn't really understand as a child, but I understand more as I'm growing up now. And so it took a lot of like me kind of like reflecting with myself and like kind of having to be the one to validate my emotions as a child to really give myself like that comfortable space to like grow and like be authentic within myself.
And so I'm thinking, you know, like we were talking about in the car, like on our way here, you know, we're talking about how, you know, yes, we're not necessarily from the same time and age as, you know, our parents or people who are older than us and stuff like that. We're both talking about the need to be more graceful, because it's also their first time living and stuff like that. But I asked you a question, Karna. You give a really good answer, and I wanted us to also talk about it here. Like, you know, with how or where do we draw the line with me giving them grace and also being like, these people still need to take accountability for their mistakes and for the things that they did wrong. And we don't find, I don't know about your parents, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but we don't find a lot of adults want to take accountability for their wrongdoings. It's either, you know, I'm older than you, I know what's best for you, or things like that. And not in every situation. Yes, most times, yes, but not in every situation do you always, you know, know what's best. You know,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So how do we, or to somebody out there, what would be your advice on where do we draw the line with I keep extending grace to this people, and okay, I'm going to need this people to start taking accountability for what they're doing, especially when we're no longer kids. You know what I mean? As we get older, you know, it's dynamic of the relationship changes. It's not so much of I tell you what to do anymore. I mean, I'm old enough to make certain decisions on my own. So to you, it's like I'm your parent. I'm trying to advise you, right? And so they at some point are still trying to toggle this power influence or issue of I am in charge. I want to show that I'm, responsible for you and stuff like that. But, how do we draw the line with that?
I'd say in terms of drawing the line, I'm definitely a person that I really love extending grace.
Right.
That's definitely something that for me is like really faith backed. Of course, like giving grace when grace has already been given to you.
Right.
And then I've also, where I draw the line is understanding that you do deserve to give grace to other people, but at the same time, understand that like boundaries have to be drawn in terms of how frequent you interact with that person.
Right.
So let's say if someone's like actively abusing you or causing you harm or just doesn't want to like understand where you're coming from,
right,
you say, okay, I understand your perspective.
Right.
And then you just kind of like draw boundaries in terms of like how you move forward with that person.
Right.
So maybe that might mean like not speaking to them like
too
as
often,
or trying to avoid that specific
right,
vicinity that might be causing you guys traffic, and then coming back to it later, because of course we shouldn't like ignore all of our problems, but sometimes people do need space to really like process what you're saying or process like how things are going. And so that's one thing, you don't want to like fuel the fire. So if I ever get into conflict with my parents, I always try to give them like that space for processing, instead of like trying to like adamantly throw the things that I'm saying towards them, because I feel like that's like a lot of the behavior that's reflected within the African community, is that like their upbringing has to be the right upbringing, and it's always like the correct thing, and so they're not really entirely open to like new ideas or much of what the younger generation has to say, and so sometimes we really have to like give them that space to like just kind of like think on the new ideas that are being brought to them, because of course like it's something you like, it hasn't been proposed to them by those like that came before them and things like that. So that's kind of like where I draw the line in terms of like conflict with my parents. Like I'll give them the space, and if it continually keeps occurring where like they're not understanding me, then that's when like other alternatives have to be explored.
Right. And so you beautifully answered that. I have no more questions concerning that, but now I want to know about friendships. How did your friends handle you being an emotional person? Like my friend is sitting down behind the camera, and I know that there's certain things that people do, or somebody says to me, and I call him and I'm like, dude, I'm gonna go off on that person, and he tells me it's never that serious, like it's never that deep, you know what I'm saying? And so he's just like, nah, you're taking it the wrong way and stuff like that. But I want to know how you are able to handle that with friendships also. Maybe you could advise me on what to do, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like I've always been that person whenever I'm in friend groups where I'm always being told, oh, you're very emotional, you took that too serious. And it's kind of like been something where like I always like will periodically tell myself, oh, maybe these people are right. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I do need to like water myself down.
I'm so sorry to cut you short, but do you actually think that there's anything like being too sensitive?
I actually don't think there's such a thing as being too sensitive, because I feel like everybody's emotions need to be validated. Like there's no right or wrong feeling. There's only right or wrong actions, in my opinion. I feel like everyone's obligated to feel how they feel. The only like real issue of where there's like a green light or a red light is like really what you do based off of your emotions. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that answer. But back to what you were saying about your friends and stuff like that. So they would say you're too insensitive and you're too sensitive, rather. Yeah. So how did that make you feel?
It really took a lot of like self-reflection to really sit with myself and understand that I can't be letting people tell me how to be me.
Right.
If I'm emotional, if you have a problem with it, go find someone else that whose character you feel like you like better. There was like I don't know if you watched Love Island. There was like a girl, Amaya.
I feel like I'm the only one in the United States who didn't watch the show. I mean, I tried. I started. Did you watch it? Because I'm like, I started, but I mean, at some point, Huda started getting me really upset. So I'm just like, I can't watch this. You know, I can't watch this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Amaya is probably what most people would think of like the typical like sensitive archetype.
Right.
And she said a specific like statement that like really resonates with me. She said, "If I'm not your cup of tea, don't drink it."
Ooh.
And so that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty much how I kind of like go about things. If I'm not your cup of tea, pretty much don't drink it.
Don't drink it.
I feel like being emotionally in tune with yourself is something that like our current generation like tend to like downplay. I feel like it also like follows along in terms of like mainstream social media and mainstream media, and how like they try to like project specific characteristics on Black people. Like when you think of the typical Black male, you think of like hyper masculine and like emotional sensitivity and being in tune with your emotions doesn't align with that.
Yeah.
And
they feel like you're not man enough when you are, you know, in tune with your emotions. And I'm just like who make these rules? Like who makes the rules that we try to live by? It's so like you make the rules. I'm just like, it makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah.
And when you think of like the typical Black woman archetype in mainstream media, you think of like the strong Black woman or like the angry Black woman, but there's never space for like the soft Black woman. And so I feel like when we really delve into that, that's when we really realize that what we're representing isn't our actual selves. We're mainly representing what mainstream media is trying to present to us, or we're mainly following along with like representation politics and not really being pop culture and not really being ourselves.
Right. And so and I love how you've just brought like, you know, society and pop culture into this, because I'm just wondering, like, in the world of today where sympathy and empathy is slowly fading away, you know, I was telling you the card, like, I'm scared for humanity. Like, I'm so scared, you know, to the degree that of what people are becoming, how strong-hearted people are becoming. I know, like, a prayer I constantly keep praying to God is like, I know the world is tough out there, but I don't ever want to become so stone-hearted by, you know, the things of the world. And so everybody's constantly talking about how it's a dog world. How do you think somebody who is similarly too sensitive, or someone who is very in tune with their emotions, can survive in the world of today where a lot of people are not?
I'd say when I'm navigating the world, in terms of like that, like dog eats dog dynamics, I'm coming from it really rooted from like a feminist perspective. An author or feminist scholarship that I really admire is Bell Hooks, and in one of her books, All About Love, she basically talks about love as like a radical lens in terms of like communion, how we proceed forward, how we move in society, and how we should like kind of treat everyone with love and kind of center everyone's narratives and give everyone space to kind of like speak how they feel and acknowledge everyone. And so if we're living in a society where we're not giving everyone equal representation, or we're not giving everyone equal access in terms of like acknowledging how they feel, we're never really gonna ever like be able to have a society where cancel culture doesn't exist. And I understand like things like cancel culture to a certain extent, but at the same time, it's like, where's the space for empathy? Where's the space for sympathy? Where's the space for people being able to redeem themselves?
You know, like people make mistakes. And I feel like now that you even bring up like, you know, cancel culture is such a very important, you know, topic, a subject in our generation, because I feel like with everybody just being on the, and everybody being so stone-hearted, again, to grace, we no longer extend grace to people, not even just even family members, like even to friendships and relationships, which we're still going to get to. But I feel like a lot of people are not even patient with each other. Like any small thing, I cut you off. Like, you know, I let you go and stuff like that. And that's the reason why there's such an epidemic and a pandemic of loneliness. And a lot, the suicides number are going up. You know, there's mental health right now for a lot of people is going down the drain because people are not in community anymore, because any small thing, I cut you off. You're not good for me. You're not, you know, and it's so crazy, because I'm just like, where do we learn to, you know, be more graceful to like humanity and to people and to ourselves. You know what I mean? It's such a shaky.
Yeah.
Entirely. You know what I'm saying? And one of the things that you talked about almost immediately after, like, you know, being an emotional person and tears and crying was about fear, right? And I put fear in two categories, and I want us to talk about the two of them separately. You know, there's the fear of that comes from you, where you feel like you're not adequate enough, you feel like you're not enough, you know, you feel like you don't have what it takes to conquer the world, to be everything that you want, to chase those dreams and chase those goals. You know, how are you able to do that? You know, one, as a black girl, two, as, you know, an immigrant herself. Like, you know, you came, I think you guys should definitely check out her social media. You know, she has movements, like, you know, the women groups that you've joined. You know, I was just saying, you know, before we started rolling, like, I saw you, like, you know, with the governor of Maryland, like, you know, with the deputy governor, like, girl, like, you know, yeah, you all over, like, you know, you're doing great stuff. And I'm just like, do you ever get to a point where you are, or have you ever been at a point where you felt inadequate? Like, how do I chase certain things, especially in a system that is seemingly built against you, you know, being a person of color and, you know, being an immigrant in general? How are you able to still dream big and deal with those fears if they're there, and, you know, chase those goals?
I always try to remind myself the sky is really my limit, and I try not to box myself in a sense. Especially if I come up with, like, any ideas. Of course, like, the doubt is gonna creep in. I feel like that's a normal human response in terms of, like, experiencing different things and new things. But I think the way I kind of, like, grapple with that is, like, I acknowledge my emotions. Like, that's one thing. I'm not ever afraid to feel fear. I just know I can't let fear, like, consume me. So a quote that I like to say is, let fear have the hour, but not the day. And so,
Oh, wow. You leaving me with some really, you know, oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, like, I if you really, like, downplay fear, you're not really, like, how do I explain this? You're not really touching base with something that you can use to fuel yourself. So the reason you're feeling fear is because you're trying something new. You're doing something that could possibly impact your future.
Right.
And just the idea of that, if you really dawn on that, if you conquer the fear, that's when you leave yourself to, like, exploring so many different possibilities. And so when it came to kind of, like, proposing the idea to write this book, I had thought about it, and of course, like, the fear crept in. I was like, am I going to be able to do this? Like, I have so much going on in terms of, like, school. Like, when am I going to have the time to write? When I'm going to have the time to do that? I first had to, like, sit with all of that fear. I had to really, like, process all the questions that I had for myself before I came up with, like, the response to that fear. And once I sat down and came up with the response to that fear, I realized, okay, I can do this. These are the questions that I had. These are the things that I feared. I'm going to conquer this fear in order to achieve this project. And so that's kind of, like, how I managed it. Always make sure, like, you're acknowledging your emotions in terms of, like, how you feel, but know that that's just your starting point, and your end point is going to be whatever you accomplish once you're able to overcome that fear.
Yeah, wow. I was searching for, like, a pen because I needed to take note, like, you can let fear have the hour, but not the day. That is so, you know, inspiring and impactful. Like, those words are going to probably sit with me for a very long time, because I think more so that's the type of fear that I have, rather than the other category of fear where it's just like, can you really do it? Do you really have what it takes to do it? And, you know, even just the fear of failure. That's not the second category, but I think that should even be in a category of its own. Like, you know, the fear of, what if I do it and it doesn't work out? You know, did you have that when you were writing the book? And, you know, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, no, I definitely did, especially coming from, like, the perspective of knowing that, like, I was self-publishing. Because most people go the traditional publishing route, and that's, like, the route that's most successful. When you kind of, like, have a publisher that does all the back-end work for you in terms of, like, finding an editor, like, all those other, like, back-end works. So I kind of, like, had to do it from the ground up. And so just, like, the fear of that, the thought of, like, oh, like, I don't know when I want to, like, launch out to everyone on social media that I'm writing a book, because what if I don't, like, complete it? Then everybody's gonna be looking at me like I'm a joke. So it's kind of like that. But I told myself, I'm like, okay, I have a starting point and I have an end point. I just have to do all the middle work in order to get there.
Right.
And so I told myself, I was like, I can't let myself sit down and be consumed by the what ifs.
Right.
If I know that same amount of time that I'm using to be thinking about the possibilities, I could use that time to actually like do the work that I want to do to get to my end point. So.
Oh, wow. And if you don't mind me asking, why did you choose to self-publish?
I chose to self-publish just because I felt like it was the shorter route,
right,
and two, just because I felt like there was less constraints,
right.
Because I know with traditional publishing, I'd have to go out and like find the publisher, so that meant like drafting like a lot of proposals, and usually that takes like a lengthy process, having to like reach out to many different people, and then like you're not, of course, gonna automatically be accepted.
Right.
So the self-publishing route just came out more appealing to me.
Right. And okay. Yeah, and it did turn out, beautifully well. I'm super excited to read the book after, we're done with this, because you went in, you were really vulnerable, to us, the readers. And the second category of fear I wanted to talk about was the fear of perception, where you're constantly thinking about, what would the next person think? What would the next person say? Would I, look stupid to this person? Recently, one of the things I started doing was posting more on TikTok. With the podcast also, and I'm thinking, oh man, what will people think? I don't want to look stupid. I know yesterday I made a video about my biology class, and after posting that video, for a while the thought was just in my head, like, oh my god, what if I now sound stupid to people, and people now think like I'm actually dumb. I'm just like, do I go back and make a video saying, hey, I'm a Dean's List student, like I'm on the Dean's List, like that's all of that is just joke. But as I was trying to do that, I just thought to myself, why do you care? Like, why do you care what people have to say about you? But it's easier, said than done, because those thoughts keep coming. Like, what will my friends think? What will my family say? What would society think? Especially even with me as a guy, how people are just like, there's just too many things. A lot of guys don't do content creation. No, we have guys who do content creation, but it's just like, it's not the norm. Like it's a more female or women dominated space and things like that. So I'm just like, how do you deal with fear of perception?
Yeah, I feel like fear of perception is something that I really had to like grapple with, and I'm still kind of like working my way through it currently. I'd say the ways that I've been dealing with it right now is just like kind of knowing that sometimes the work you embark on is bigger than you, and reminding yourself what's fueling your work. I have a passion towards uplifting marginalized voices, just understanding that not everyone is given a platform, not everyone has the ability to access like the accessibility towards the spaces that I'm currently in or I have been in. And so kind of like just understanding that has been something that like kind of has me understand, okay, maybe this is more than just me. Maybe instead of letting what other people might think of me impact how I move forward, what if I think about the other people that might want to have access to these specific spaces or might want to have these platforms that they don't have access to? Like, I could be their spokesperson.
Right. Go. Okay, so you were talking about, and I wanted to find out, like, did moving from Cameroon to Dubai to then to the United States help you out with dealing with your fear of perception of what people, because maybe you were already used to it longer than, a couple other people. So did you find that easier when you were writing the book?
Yeah, I'd say living in like so many different environments is kind of giving me an outlook into like the diversity of thought that's like kind of out there in the world. Like I've been to so many different countries where I understand, like I've heard different perspectives from various different people. And so when it comes to like the fear of perception, I always tell myself, I'm like, okay, if someone doesn't understand my perspective, there's going to be another person that does.
Right.
Just because I've been introduced to so many different spaces, I've heard so many different thoughts. And so I feel like I'm very culturally rich in terms of like, how do I explain this? But kind of like going back to that idea of like being into different spaces kind of like opens your mind.
Right.
And so I feel like there's going to be other people that are out there who have open minds as well. And so I know that, like, if I'm ever scared that someone might not understand me, there's always going to be another person that does.
Right.
And even if people don't understand me, so what? I understand myself. So it's all right.
Right. Well, so would you say that you don't care whatsoever what anybody has to think or say about you?
For the most part, yes. Yeah.
And I'm just like, how do you get there? Like, how do you really get there as a person where you're just like, you know what, like everybody, like, you know what I mean? Like, where I'm just like, you know, do you ever feel different? Do you feel like you're different from most typical immigrant children?
I feel like we have a lot of stories.
Right.
I'd say my experiences are certainly different from everyone because, of course, the immigrant story isn't the same. Like, a child that might have been coming straight from Cameroon would probably have a different story than I'd have.
Right.
So I'd say that in terms of like stories, there's going to be a difference. But we all, of course, have like some shared common ground or like some shared like similarities, like, you know, we're of course like both migrants.
Right.
So that's where I'd say like the difference would really be.
Yeah, but I meant like, do you think you're different in, you know, how majority of Africans who come here tend to follow a path? You know, you come, go to school, get a 9-to-5, you know, start a family type of situation. I mean, you're doing something different. You are writing a book, you know, you're pursuing. Do you feel like you doing all these things make you different from a typical immigrant child?
Yeah, I'd definitely say then, yeah, it does make me different from a typical immigrant child.
Right.
Of course, like, I have this like drive to really like achieve the things that I want to achieve, and I've just been really fortunate to like be put in those spaces where I can like really achieve my dreams. And I feel like other children like in Africa probably might have similar passions than me, that like, you know, if they were allotted similar opportunities, there's a possibility that they also too might be able to like achieve those same things. So yeah, every day I'm just like really grateful that I was like given so many different opportunities and platforms to like get where I am to this current day.
Right. Oh wow. And so, you know, aside from writing, because you're involved in a lot of things, like I said, you know, you're involved in like female movements and, you know, doing a lot of stuff like, you know, with the governor and all that. Like, you know, what fuels your hunger? Like, what keeps you driven, what keeps you grounded and keeps you going every day, even the days you don't feel like showing up? Because I'm sure there are days where you know, like that, you know. So what keeps you what keeps you grinding?
I'd say what keeps me grinding is like, I'm one of those people, I don't even think it's possible for me to really get like full of myself.
Right.
Of course, like, you know, self-love and, you know, uplifting yourself, but I try not to get too like arrogant in terms of like my achievements. And so my real fuel and real drive really comes back from like remembering like all the children that like are back home, and just like knowing that like I'm really privileged to have the opportunities that I'm given currently. And so I really talked about this in one of the chapters in my book, where I basically talked about the crisis going on back home in Cameroon. And how a lot of children are unfortunately victims of the civil crisis going on back home. And so just like being here in the States and hearing about it, hearing my parents speak about it, hearing about the pools of blood that are being shed on the streets, it really had me sometimes really like sitting down and thinking like, what am I doing with my life? Like, what did I deserve to really get put in the position that I'm in right now? Like, I'm literally safe and sheltered in the United States. Like, I'm going to school, like, have so many different opportunities. But there's people back home who don't have access to that. There's people back home that are starving, people back home facing housing insecurities, displacement. And so just thinking about that is really put me in a space where I know that, like, the things that I want to achieve ultimately is being fueled by them. So if I'm ever given the opportunity to have a platform where I can speak about certain things, I'm going to be speaking about the people that I know are really suffering back home. I'm going to make sure that, like, even though I'm going to uplift myself and talk about, you know, my accomplishments, I always remember that they're the ones fueling my purpose. Right.
And, you know, Yeah, that is a beautiful, answer, to what feels like. Because I'm just like, you're involved in a lot of stuff, from writing. You're writing and you're still on your way to, pre-med, pre-med track. Like, I was telling you in the car, like, I feel like anybody who's doing, like, engineering of some sorts or, like, medicine, I just feel like God created you guys different. Like, you guys are just built different. Because I'm just like, I don't know how you guys do the physics, the chemistry, the biology. Like I said, I made a video about biology yesterday. Like, I'm doing biology, and I'm just like, what am I doing here? I sat in class yesterday, and I'm just like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I here? Right? And I know that you've touched on so many amazing things like, friendship and family and stuff like that. But I'm just like, what does friendship really mean to you?
That's a good question. Friendship to me is, of course, something that's rooted in love. And when I talk about love, I'm not talking about just like the feeling that you get or like the butterflies in your stomach. When I talk about love, I talk about things like sacrifice, things like quality time, things like always being there for that person. Those are like the values within love that I really hold dear to me.
Right.
And so whenever I like want to embark on a new friendship, whenever I meet someone new, those are like the things that I look for. Like, are you someone that's here to like generally build something that's like something beautiful, something that requires the quality time, the sacrifice, and just making that sure that we're there for each other. If you're not, then maybe you're not the friend for me, but if you are, then yes.
And you just touched on, my God, may I first of all say that you are filled with so much wisdom. Like, you have left me with a lot of things to think about after this. Like, you've touched on how love is not, it's not just about like butterflies. And I feel like that a lot of people don't get that. Like, love is more, like I saw it yesterday. Love is a verb. It's more of an action. Like, it's continuous. Like, I don't have to, with love, I don't have to be on good terms with you, like even in friendships and romantic relationships, to continue to do good by you and to stand by you and things like that. And a lot of people don't realize like love is more work, it's more effort, it's more doing, it's more action, it's more of putting in the work than less of how I feel. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like even in friendships and and I think that's the problem with our generation. I feel like, again, to go back to cancel culture, people don't really understand, like, we are human, right? I'm gonna make mistakes, you are gonna make mistakes, and I need to be graceful enough because I love you as a person. Like, I need to be able to, first of all, even accept you for who you are, right? Both good and bad, because everybody comes with good and bad, and to be able to say, okay, maybe these things that are a little, and who we don't even say that this thing that a particular person does is bad or anything like that, but like maybe these things that you do, I certainly don't like it, right? Or I don't like, but I'm going to be graceful enough to work with you on that, and rather than just kick you out, you know what I mean? And how do you as a person select your friends?
I'd say the first thing would just be one, like, common values,
right?
Because I feel like that's a good starting point in order to like kind of like avoid conflict in a
What
sense.
are similar values that you look out for?
Okay, similar values that I look out for is number one, I'd say I kind of love friends that are like have similar belief systems as me.
Right. Like religion.
Yeah, religious belief systems. But I'm always open towards friends that are not. Okay. But I'd say my closest friends have like similar belief systems as me. Another one is just like people that are like open to like sharing vulnerability, because I feel like that's a really important aspect of like friendships, is being able to be vulnerable with each other.
Where do you find your friends? Because I'm looking for vulnerable friends. Like, where do you find these people?
I mean, it's really just like talking, like making sure like you're open towards having like random conversations with people. Like much of my friends that I am friends with right now is just from like random conversations that we had when I just seen them and I noticed something, thought to bring it up, we laughed about it, and I was like, hey, can I have your number? And they were like, oh yeah, that's cool. Or like, can I have your Instagram? And then of course just continuously chatting it up with them, because that's how you kind of like build that vulnerability space.
Did you have to teach your friends, any of your friends, to be vulnerable? Or how to be in tune with their emotions? Yeah,
I have a couple friends that I feel like the being in tune with your emotions thing kind of like rubbed onto them. Like one of my friends, like I had a specific like problem in my life that I always talk to her about.
Right.
And she didn't really understand my perspective in terms of like empathy, which is like the relational aspect, but she definitely did have sympathy for me in regards to that situation. And so it wasn't until like months after, when she was put in that exact same situation, where she really understood. She was like, okay, now I understand why you feel that way.
You know?
And then that kind of like bred the grounds for us to be vulnerable with each other about like our shared experience.
And
so
and you know, speaking of that, that's one of the things that I constantly tell my friends and tell people that care. Like, I've just learned in life to never say never. You know what I mean? If somebody comes to tell you something, so on, or I look at people and go, oh, that could never be me. Because I feel like a lot of people are just so judgmental.
Yeah,
like, you know? And I found that life has a way of humbling you with situations where you say never. It sometimes then put you in that situation where you're just like, oh, that can never be me. Okay, you're in that situation now. Do you get what I'm saying? And so I'm constantly learning to never say never and to not judge people, whether or not I agree with their way of life and things that they do, because I've never walked a day in your shoes. I don't know what it means to be you. I don't know why you do the things that you do. And I really feel like the world would be such a better place if people were more empathetic, sympathetic, and judged less. Like, you know, and speaking of religion, you are Christian, right? And, you know, we find that Christians happen to be like the most judgmental, like, I don't want to say the most judgmental religion, because I've never been in another religion, so I don't know, you know, about whether or not they are. But I'm just like, how can we handle that? How can we be less judgmental as Christians?
Yeah, I realized that once again, like, the Bible talks about love thy neighbor. Like, even though you might not agree with that person, you always have to, once again, like, stem from a lens of love. And the Bible talks about how God is love. And so you can't really say that you care for a person or you have love if you're not, like, you know, being open to that person and kind of like open to their ideals. And so that's kind of like how I go about things.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. And, like, you know, speaking of love, you know, I just want to pick your brain a little bit. You know, what do you think about the dating pool in this generation? Because I call it a pool. You know, I saw a video on TikTok where someone was saying that, you know, if you are in a relationship and you and your partner like have an argument, you better keep it, because all the good people are gone. Like, the people we're left with on the streets, oh man, like, it's so crazy. What's your view on like this entirety of like situationships and talking stages and, like, you know, the whole 9 yards? You know, what's your view on that?
I'd say in terms of situationships, I really feel like it's to each its own. But personally, it's not something that, like, I like to entertain. Just because I feel like it's really emotionally draining. Like, if you're following on with something with someone but there's no clear label on it, it's just, there's gonna be so much space for like mental gymnastics,
you know,
someone's gonna get hurt, just things like that. And I just feel like it's not really a healthy thing to like touch on,
you know. But I find that that's why sometimes I really feel like I'm the one who is not normal. I find that there are people who like things like that. They like being unstable and unsure of what we are and stuff like that. And, you know, with the whole talking, there's the 3 months rule of talking stage. Like, you know, you talk to someone for 3 months. If they don't ask you to be there, you know, or you don't ask, you know, they're moving or they're leaving and stuff like that. Like, you know, how do you as a person, you know, how do you date in 2025, you know, in this pool that we're in, you know?
I'd say number one, don't embark on a situationship. Just once again, like, the mental gymnastics is just not something you really want to.
Do you entertain talking stages?
I feel like talking stages are kind of like how you get to the path of being in a relationship. So I feel like they are very much something that is true and definitely something that is efficient into getting into a relationship.
Should they be timed?
But I don't know about in terms of like time frame, because I feel like everyone's different. Everyone's like relational dynamic is different. But I do think that you really can sense if a person's serious or not with you based on how they act. And just like based on how you see the way they move, you can really tell if they're like wanting to proceed forward or not.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, if you're with a guy and you realize that, like, he hasn't taken any initiatives to, like, take you on a date, or hasn't, like, brought you flowers, or hasn't really expressed like any intention of going forward, then maybe we should cut ties. But
right.
Yeah.
Are you of the opinion that, while you are in a talking stage, you're allowed to talk to multiple people at the same time? You know how people say you never commit to one until, especially for women, like until they've, put a ring on it, or I've even heard women say that they're single until they're married. Like the things we talk about, or things people say in this generation. But what do you think about that? Like, are you in a talking stage allowed to talk to multiple people?
I personally don't do that, just because I feel like it's very like time consuming.
Yeah,
like
it's very tasking. Like, right. I'm barely managing you as a person. Like, I'm gonna be managing like 3 other people. Like, how do people do that?
Yeah, and I feel like you don't really give like any of those people like the full like experience,
right?
And so you never really get to like fully know them, and so now you're just left with like maybe like 4 different people that you've had conversations with, but I wouldn't really say you like were talking to, or getting to know.
Right. So what would be your advice to someone? I don't know if you are in a relationship or if you're not, like if you're single, but like to those of us, because I'm aware I don't even want to say I'm on the streets, because I don't believe in a lot of things that happen, but I'm single. And my guy right there, are you single? Are you single, sir? No answer. Right. But, what would your advice to guys be, who are looking today, and then for women who are also looking today?
I'd say for guys, show initiative, because I feel like that's something that's really missing in this generation.
I'm so sorry to cut you short. I just want to know, can you make the first move on a guy?
That's an interesting question. I feel like it's circumstantial.
Right.
Like, for a lady, you can kind of like hint you're interested, but I personally just follow along the rules of like the male is the leader, like male headship. Of course, like, you have to kind of, be the one initiating things.
That, right. But what if you really like this guy and he's not it? And because I feel like sometimes people forget that guys too are humans. And we get shy sometimes, even though my homeboy be telling me, like, because the thing about me, I just believe, like, if it's meant to be, I would somehow gain the confidence or whatever. So because I know one of the last people that I was dated or something like that, I had before approaching her, I had passed her like three different times. Passed her the first time, the first day. I told God, okay, if it's meant to be, let me see her a second time. I saw her a second time. I said, okay, one more time. You know what I mean? And people forget that, guys. I mean, at the same time, I wouldn't want a lady, making the like shooting shot, but at least make it easy for us, like let like at least let us know that you're feeling us too, because we also don't like to get rejected and get turned down, right? And so I don't know, how do you handle that, or how do you for you as a lady, like, do you make it obvious to whoever you're interested in that you are actually interested in this person, or how do you do it? Like,
yeah, I'd say, of course, like, as a woman, there's certain things you can do in terms of like hinting that you're interested to the person. So like, if they come up to you to have a conversation, like, be engaged, maybe smile a little, giggle a little. And I feel like the shyness thing is like, it's really relational. Like, the girl will also be as shy just as much as the guy is shy. Right. So it's like, for both of them, I'd say like definitely like pray for that like boldness, and like try to make sure the environment isn't uncomfortable.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then that's how I feel like it naturally happens.
Right. And then there was a conversation around like guys. I have female friends and we're platonically friends, right? And I've for no reason had feelings for any of them. And I know like people say that to females, that whoever is your guy friend was either interested in you and you turned them down, and so you guys are friends, or they're secretly interested or in love with you. Are you of the opinion that guys and girls can have platonic friendship, a pure platonic friendship, no strings attached?
I actually recently talked about this with a friend. I feel like, yeah, guys and girls can definitely have platonic friendships. I guess the only like real
Genuine, like genuine,
yeah,
no strings attached, no
yeah,
feelings.
genuinely.